Okay, so we'll continue our study of the supposed intermediate forms. All right. Have you ever heard of 1470 skull? We will study 1470 skull in more detail when we get to radioisotopic dating.
In a PowerPoint near.
Yeah, coming soon to a PowerPoint near you. Yeah, like you've been in my classes before. 1470 skull is almost certainly human. It doesn't really have any quote unquote primitive features to it. So not really much of an evidence for the evolutionists. It is a little bit smaller than your typical human skull. There's a lot of variety. There's a lot of variety amongst humans. You know, the crazy thing is that we have not been able to associate brain capacity with intelligence in humans. For example, the average male actually has a bigger brain than the average female.
Yeah, the size.
But it doesn't seem to do us any good.
A bird is smarter than
I know, right?
Dog.
I mean, we use like 10% of our brain, which means
That's actually a myth. The whole, you only use 10% of your brain. You actually use your entire brain.
but like
we're
the
not-
memory storage.
Your memory is
That's-
crazy. You can learn something new every second for the next 2 million years and never use up all your memory.
So we use like less than 10% of our memory
So
capacity.
apparently you're designed to live a long time.
I'm gonna run my computer off my brain.
Is there a way you could like get to your memories?
You can upload your brain to the cloud.
Like where someone else could look through your memories.
Oh yeah.
Or like you could like
That is-
see your memories.
That is possible, but
Yeah,
let's hope that never happens.
You
I
can,
know,
you
it's
can,
really
upload your brain to the cloud.
Yeah, there's
Well,
people trying to do that.
Like,
So,
I want to
the 1470 skull is not really much in the way of evidence for evolution. Okay. Java Man has been proven to be a human arm bone with an ape skull, so that's not much of evidence either. Tarkana they got really excited about Tarkana and then they figured out that this 5 foot, I think it's 5'10" skeleton is only 9 years old. And that really hurt their feelings because they found it in a layer of rock they thought was really old. So it should be primitive, but apparently it's bigger, stronger, faster, smarter than your average human running around today. So that's
5'10".
5'10", I think. At 9 years of age.
That's
So,
not me.
keep in mind these are estimates, right? So we're basing that off of the teeth. Okay, so all the teeth are grown in, so that means that you're dealing with an adult set of teeth, and how fused the plates are in your skull. Okay, one of the reasons, for example, they thought that Neanderthals were so old was because the plates of their skull were totally fused together, almost completely smooth. Really bizarre because humans don't usually live long enough for that to happen anymore. Anyway, Cro-Magnon man has been acknowledged to belong to modern humans. Again, higher average height, larger average brain capacity than your modern humans. Neanderthals, same thing. Taller, bigger brain capacity than your modern humans. Okay, so this is not evidence for evolution. This might be de-evolution, all right? So for example, Cro-Magnon had an average of 1,600 to 1,700 cubic centimeters of brain capacity compared to about 1,440 for modern humans. And again, I want to emphasize, just because you have a smaller size to you does not mean that you are less intelligent. The average intelligence between males and females is exactly the same to the best of our ability to measure. Although the curve might be a bit flatter for males. There is some debate about that. So in other words, if you kind of like aggression, if you take the average male and the average female out of the population and you bet that the man is more aggressive, you're right 60% of the time. So the averages is not a huge difference. But if you pick the 100 most aggressive people out of a population, they are all men, which is why there are way more males than females in prison, right? So the curve is flatter. Does that make sense? So you don't have as many. So in other words, it's the extremes. that are important when you talk about crime, violent crime, things like that. That's what you're looking at is those extreme situations, okay? With intelligence, it might be the same kind of thing. So in other words, it's possible, although we haven't proven this, that the 100 dumbest people in your population are all men. And maybe the 100 smartest ones, again, the IQ studies haven't really shown that to be. The 10 smartest people in the world, 4 of them are ladies. So looks like you guys are doing pretty good. And by the way, they're way smarter than I am. I'm talking about people with IQs of like 200. Okay.
Is it?
What's my IQ? Can we do IQ tests in here?
I don't like
I don't
IQ
wanna know
tests.
my-
Me neither. I really
I don't
do.
If you want to know what your
You can
IQ
always
is,
count
it's
me.
probably above average. Depending on which internet test you want to
Yeah.
trust, I mean,
What's your IQ?
no idea. It's above average, I guess.
My brother was telling me.
Other than that, it can definitely be measured.
What if
There's
you
a
take
lot of-
like a bunch of different tests and then average your number?
That would be a better way of doing it. There's a lot of debate about IQ and whether it actually measures how intelligent you actually are. Here's the thing. Here's the thing. It does predict success to a certain extent. If there was something wrong with the IQ test, it shouldn't be able to predict how well you do at school, for example, right? It turns out it's not as important as how hard you work, but it is one of those factors, right? You don't find people with IQs of 95 taking calculus and doing well. Just not, they just can't, okay? And I don't blame them. I couldn't do well in calculus either. I mean, it's really complicated. Anyway, so
So are you saying that you don't think you have it higher than 95?
no, I'm just saying there's a lot of calculus that doesn't make any dadgum sense, and I don't like things that don't make sense. And I don't tend to do well, especially when your professor is one of those guys who walks into the classroom on day one like, now, here's the thing, class. They're not going to be doing any application of these principles because I am a pure mathematician. I should have left right then. Like, okay, bye.
It's even worse when you have someone who can't speak English or
Oh,
barely
dude.
can speak
Oh,
English. Taking
Yeah,
my brother
That's a
is
problem.
at Baylor right now, and he had a calculus teacher that couldn't speak English.
yeah.
Base.
You're he's 2 foreign languages away. He's speaking math in a foreign language. That's a problem. I actually swayed a committee to not hire a guy for that reason.
A fair
They-
reason not.
They had the committee, the board in charge of hiring, the math people, and they were calling this guy to, they wanted to figure out if this is somebody, a professor that we should hire to teach classes here at SMU. And they thought, what would be a great idea? Why don't we invite some students? Let's get some really crazy ones. Like Cartwright, get over here. And so they had a group of us there. I just got shoehorned into being a lab assistant, so I got on all these panels and stuff. And we listened to this guy's presentation, and I believe he was from India. Super cool guy, obviously really sharp. I mean, very intelligent guy. Great teacher. He was passionate about it, but he spoke very broken English. And I kept my mouth shut the whole time. Everybody's giving their reviews. They were all very positive. We're gonna recommend you to be hired and all this stuff. And they got to me, and I was like, dude, I have a really great. I agree with everything you've been said. First of all, great presentation. You're obviously very sharp, but I have a very good ear for accents, and I had a hard time understanding your words, just the English part of it. And if I were trying to learn this material, I think that would be a serious growth. I'm not trying to discourage you, man. You can work on your accent. You can practice. You've come this far. Don't let this slow you down. Okay, keep working on this, and you can, like, if I can imitate your accent, you can imitate mine, right? Like, I could imitate your. I'm not going to.
Please,
No.
please do.
Right, but if you go out there,
Nope.
you
stop.
can learn.
No, we're good.
Like an
Yeah, that
It's
was.
like
very
so in the Australian outback, you've got to be careful because any moment you might die, right? Over there is a king cobra, the most deadly venomous snake in the world. I'm gonna poke him with a stick. That's Steve Irwin. He's mad. He's really mad. All right, so then they all changed their minds. Everybody on the panel was like, "Oh yeah, if I were actually trying to learn this, that would be a problem. Yeah, you didn't get hired.
If I was out of school, I would just be like, Shannon, you're really, really horrible for this. Yeah, you're hired.
Okay, so we got to understand that there's a lot of variety amongst humans. Okay, not all of it is genetic, but some of it is. A lot of it's environment. So I submit to you that if they found these skulls out buried in the ground somewhere, this would be the strongest evidence for macroevolution ever. Yes, you see, boys and girls, these weird creatures, we call them chihuahuas, apparently evolved from a rat millions of years ago.
I believe it.
And over time,
That's like
they
an actual
evolved
feasible.
in this thing we're going to call a pug. Now, these horrible creatures couldn't even breathe properly.
It looks like a bird.
I feel so bad for
Dude,
pugs.
It
like,
looks like
they
a
have-
bird.
they-
their sinuses are jacked.
They have been bred into living a bad
Like 100 years ago, pugs looked like real dogs. Anyway, over millions of years, the pugs evolved, but their sinuses were just terrible. These creatures suffered. And then, finally, they evolved a proper nose, and this apparently gave them such an advantage. Right, they became the bull terrier, which then split into the Bernese mountain dog, the German shepherd, the Saint Bernard, the collie, and eventually became the grey wolf. Right. Well,
that would be backwards, but
that's backwards. That's backwards to reality, isn't it? We all know that if you do horrible things to a wolf for thousands of years, you end up getting a chihuahua out of it. Because we understand the differentiation and subspeciation within a kind is a loss of genetic information. For example, let's say you have a bunch of wolves and there's cold snap, extremely cold temperatures, glaciation, all that stuff. Only the wolves with the thickest fur will survive. Is that evolution?
Natural selection.
You could argue that it's natural selection and that the wolves now have a thicker coat and they're more adapted to their environment than
oh, would
them.
that coat would
But
change
that would
right
only-
back
that
as
would
soon as
only
the
be
warm-
there.
No, they might only have the genetics for the long coat now. So you have this variety of coat thicknesses and lengths and all that stuff. And you weed out all of the ones that are like Chihuahua-like coats. It turns out when you only have the genes for the longer coats, you end up in a few generations getting a wolf with an even longer coat than its grandparents had.
What about
Okay.
whenever it gets hot?
But if it gets hot, it's screwed, right? It's adapted to this environment, but it has lost
That's like how huskies.
all of this. Exactly. It has lost all this genetic information that it originally had. When you adapt a species to its environment, this is a loss of genetic information. And you can't get it back. You can take a Chihuahua out of a wolf. I don't know why you would, but you can. But you can't get a wolf out of a Chihuahua. So microevolution or subspeciation is the opposite of macroevolution. When I pointed this out to my genetics professor, she was really mad at me. But there's no answer for this from the evolutionists, all right? So, and again, I want to emphasize, we don't have the fossils to argue about. I have given you the only examples I know of intermediate forms. And even if we had the fossils, there are ways to interpret it, right? Because we can see in the modern world that, things like this are all the same kind of animal, right? And so this is why a lot of young Earth creationists look at all the different types of Triceratop, Pentaceratop, and the one that only has one horn, and the one that doesn't have much of a shield on
Would
its
that be
back.
a monoceratops?
I mean, I think there is a monoceratops. Anyway, we would look at all those animals and say, well, you know what? It's really possible that they're all the same kind of animal, right? And the ones with only one horn are way smaller. Well, maybe they're just young Triceratops and they grow more horns on their heads as they get older. Thank God humans don't do that, right? So if we only had fossils of these dog breeds, this would be touted as the greatest evidence for macroevolution ever. We all know that it's the opposite of that, genetically speaking, right? So we can interpret fossils more than one way, all right? If such a fossil progression existed, biological difficulties associated with transitional forms would be insurmountable, all right? So for example, getting yourself from a reptile to a bird. Now, of course, you got feathers, that's a problem. There's good evidence that a scale is actually a devolved feather. And that's why chickens
Wait,
and lots of birds have scales in their feet. They start out as feathers and something weird happens to them. And they end up with scales.
okay, so I heard, so snakes, right? I've played with them and dealt with them. The big snakes, next to the cloaca, they have like two little things. People are saying that those are like legs. Or they used to be legs. Do you know like what?
Yeah, so here's the
About
thing.
that?
I think snakes are cursed animals.
Really?
They used to have legs and, be normal like lizard things, and got cursed and said you're gonna crawl on your belly the rest of your life.
There was a historian
Are you
who
being
reported
serious or-
slime snakes.
Like that's in the Bible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's Genesis. But you're saying like that like could be like the proof of that.
I believe the curse altered the genetic code. I believe before the curse, roses didn't grow thorns. I believe before the curse, venom did exist, but it wasn't dangerous to humans. I believe that the curse of sin altered the genetics of animals and plants. And snakes don't have legs anymore. God cursed them. They don't have eyelids either.
My friend told me she did some research and found a legless lizard.
Yeah.
That's a thing.
Yeah.
I've never seen it.
Legless lizards do exist. They can call them lizards because they have openings for their ears and they can blink.
Oh.
You've ever seen a scaleless?
Oh, and they have the same scale over their whole body. They don't have
Horrible. With
Scoots.
hairless cat.
That's adorable.
Hairless cats are wrong, right?
hairless cats are again
Yeah.
like poodles.
Or hairless
Cats are
cat.
generally
That's
wrong.
wrong. Scaleless snakes. It's wrong. That's
They're
horrible.
both look like the cleanest animal ever.
Ew.
You're just gross.
Yeah,
disgusting personality.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like a chihuahua. Like you could have had a wolf, and now you have this.
My cat will be hiding in the hall, and I'll be walking down, and she'll come and just smack me in the leg.
There's no. By the way, if you fall asleep in my class, I might throw things. So I threw an eraser again one time
Hey, Eli,
with a
remember
chalk
Spanish
eraser.
Yeah, I
class?
remember
Shoot.
Spanish class.
Cloud of dust. I thought it was bad. But during the moment, I laughed at him. He's just like, whoop! Cloud of dust everywhere. He starts coughing.
He was allergic.
Like, yeah, allergic to calcium. Who knew, right? It's like a fish being H2O and
Just
all.
don't throw.
So if you're going to evolve into a bird, okay, from a reptile, one of the things you have to evolve is a hole in your lung. This has been recognized by evolutionists as being kind of a problem. I don't know if you've ever had a hole in your lungs. Now, some things should be holy, but not roofs and not lungs, okay? How many Halo fans do we have in the audience, right? So in Halo, there's one of the scenes where the guy gets a needler to the lung, right? And he goes, "There's a skeleton on me. I'll slow you down," right? And he's like, one of the commanding officers, "You're gonna be fine, son." He goes, and squirts that foam on him, right? And he goes, "Thanks, boss. All right, let's go kill some aliens," right? He's good to go. But yes. ODST, yeah, that's what it is. So he's sealed off his lung and now he can breathe again, right? That's how your lungs work. You got a muscle on your diaphragm that expands. Yeah, flex tape. This would work. If it's sealed, it would work. Anyway, so you have to have that seal because if you have a punctured lung and your diaphragm is trying to draw air into your lungs, you can't create this vacuum, and you do not do this whole drawing fresh air into your lungs. And this is a problem for
It
you.
could also be like filled with blood and stuff
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
various
and-
things like that. Although they have proven that humans can breathe hyperoxygenated liquid.
Yeah.
You've seen this?
Yeah, there is liquid that you can go in and
Right.
breathe into. You would get enough oxygen, but it'd be pretty good to go.
It really messes with you, apparently. They've proven that they did experiments with mice, like, put them down there, this hydrogenated liquid, and the mice start freaking out, like, we're gonna drown! They're like, ah! What the frick? They're like swimming around. This is the weirdest thing. Like, do not put this thing back in a cage with a big pool of water, okay? Do not do that.
That would
Anyway.
be horrible.
So this is one example. We can look at woodpeckers, right? Woodpeckers have all these shock absorbers on their face, okay? They're kind of like the opposite of hummingbirds. Have you noticed that? Like a hummingbird's like, I said, delicately flowers. And the woodpecker is like, I'm gonna stab bugs out of this tree with my face knife, right? And they have all these like shock absorbers in their skull to keep themselves from literally killing themselves by banging their heads on trees. I don't recommend that you bang your head on trees, okay? It will still scramble your brain. Your brain is scrambled enough as it
What
is.
if you make shock absorbers for it? And
Yeah,
then,
if you do that,
dragon plug mats and like.
still not a good idea, right?
Have you seen Wild Kratts? That's how I learned
Yes.
about that.
Yeah. So and the woodpecker also has a tongue that goes around his
It
skull.
like, yeah, it
Yeah.
like doubles back and then turns into one.
Anyway, my point is they're radically different, and they have to be in order to find those pesky insects underneath tree bark. Okay. So trying to evolve this thing by a series of small steps, this doesn't seem to be particularly possible, right? The same thing with whales, right? Now, apparently the first creatures to crawl upon the land, breathe the air, and all that stuff, survived because there wasn't anything to eat them on the land. But if you can imagine a cow thing trying to swim through the ocean with Megalodon running around, you get the idea. This is not going to survive very well. Manatees are kind of hilariously, pathetically. Well, first of all, they're not whales, and they're not evolving into whales. And I haven't even heard an evolutionist try to claim that recently, so there's that. And then second of all, they're kind of hopelessly, like,
They're more like a seal
indefensible.
or a sea lion.
Yeah.
Kind of like a
But
blubbery-
herbivores, right? Anyway,
we're
So-
still trying to save them.
do what?
They're
Still trying to
adorable.
save them.
You know, sure. Knock yourself out. The
They're
sea
nice.
cows, I mean, yeah, they're gentle giants and all that stuff. Okay, but anyway, my point is, there's lots of examples we get. Giraffes. A giraffe should blow its brain up every time it takes a drink because of the blood pressure.
Yeah.
It has the strongest heart of any animal on land. Okay, because it has to pump blood all the way up to its brain, right? And so that blood pressure, when the head is below the heart, should blow this guy's head off anytime he tries to take a drink. It doesn't though, because the giraffe has all these little valves in its neck to keep the blood from rushing to its brain and dying of a brain aneurysm when this happens. Okay, trying to evolve this by a series of small steps seems impossible. Like, what are you going to evolve first? A long neck? Well, then you can't get blood to your brain. This is the problem for you. You're going to evolve all these valves because, again, that's going to slow down blood to your brain. This is the problem for you. Are you going to evolve this strong heart first? Because that's going to be a problem for you. You'll die of a brain aneurysm. You have to have the whole thing. And we'll talk about this more when we get to genetics and we discuss the concept of irreducible complexity. Okay? It certainly seems like these creatures were designed from the outset, everything ready to go. Bombardier beetles be another example of that. They mix two chemicals in their butt that explode. Okay, now you don't think about this very often, but it'd be very difficult to survive without a butt. Okay, you blow your butt off, you're gonna have problems. This will ruin your whole day. Okay,
Maybe a little longer.
maybe. Yeah, you could.
Don't put dynamite.
This is, yeah,
Anywhere
this
near
is
your
not
body.
this is not gonna work out for you, right? Bombardier beetle mixes hydroxychloroquine and hydroxyquinone in 2 chambers in its butt, and magically has an inhibitor in there that keeps its butt from exploding. And right before it squirts this stuff out, it mixes another chemical in its butt that inhibits the inhibitor, and then this hydroxychloroquine and hydroxyquinone mix together and basically explode in the face of the frog or the ant or whatever's trying to eat the bombardier beetle. All right? Right. In whatever, or you, if you're trying to mess with it, okay? Trying to evolve this by a series of small steps, it's almost hilarious thinking about all these little bugs, you know, accidentally blowing themselves up. Look, if you blow yourself up, you're not going to have a lot of kids after that, all right? So trying to reason out how this is going to be an evolutionary advantage, it's just hilarious, okay? Again, there's way more biologic problems we could look at, symbiotic relationships, and just it's just hilarious trying to explain these things without God. I'm glad that that is not my job. Okay, we got to talk about humans in the fossil record. And here's the thing. Human fossils are rare in the fossil record. They do exist, but remember that God says he's going to wipe them out. So that might be one reason why human fossils are rare. Also, humans like to build cities and stuff on hills. The military advantage, your enemy's coming from a long way, you could throw rocks at them, stuff like that. If you go to Marine boot camp, there's a poster on the wall that says, never fight in a basement. You'll remember this for the rest of your life because there's a picture of a Marine tossing a grenade into a basement. Never fight in a basement, okay? You just don't. That's a bad idea, right? So being on that hill affords you a certain level of protection against flooding as well. So that wasn't a concern before the flood, because there wasn't any rain. When the flood happened, most likely it didn't inundate humans, many humans, until the later stages of the flood. So they didn't end up getting buried like all the sea creatures did, right? In fact, that's true for a lot of vertebrates as well. Stegosaurus. We find what, 8 skeletons of Stegosaurus? That's all we had. Okay. A T-Rex skull is worth $20 million. Why? It's ridiculously rare. Okay, so large vertebrates are very rare in the fossil record. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, you run into a lot of Bigfoot-like stories. Now, I know some of you guys are related to people who think Bigfoot is a real thing and all this stuff, and I would really get a kick out of this if there weren't so many firearms in America. You better bet your boots I would dress up as Bigfoot and go scare people out in the woods. That would
You'd get
be
shot.
hilarious. Actually, I might do it with body armor on. Anyway,
You
so
could still do that because you can find some liberal that doesn't have any
there you
guns,
go. So we can
and
go.
go in their backyard.
Is it weird that these
Yeah.
sightings only happen in like Washington State, you know, California? You don't see them in Oklahoma. There's no, oh yeah, I saw Bigfoot over there, shot him with my 30-06. Turned out he was my neighbor kid. Sorry about that. I think your arm will grow back, you know. Put some of this herb down there. Anyway,
A lot of
So-
sightings in Canada, though.
a lot of sightings in Canada where it's really difficult to own a firearm.
Personally, I think Bigfoot just is very valid.
So we run into a lot of Bigfoot-like stories. Okay, look, guys, we would catch photos of Bigfoot on game cameras like all over the place. It was real, all right? A lot of stories about Bigfoot come from people who were definitely on some herb when they were encountering this guy. Some of them are apparently legit, okay? And you got to understand they see tracks, and these tracks are huge, and they're definitely human-like, yeah, like a brown bear. Brown bears are the only animals in the world that have tracks similar to humans, okay? And they will walk on their hind legs all by themselves, way off in the distance. Oh, this thing was huge, and I just caught a glimpse of it in the trees, ran over there, and it ran off way faster than us. And we got there, it was this huge track, it ate our dog. Yeah, it sounds like a bear to me. Call me crazy. Anyway, so I have found a lot of Bigfoot-like stories. There's a lot of myths and legends and stuff when you start looking at examples of human giants and also human fossil records. So just kind of be aware of that, okay? There are some links you can go and research in here. Basically, if you're going to claim that there's lots of evidence for humans being giants in the past and, you know, finding these skeletons 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 feet tall, you have to claim that the Smithsonian is actively suppressing this information, and I'm okay with that. I'm definitely okay with the Smithsonian suppressing a lot of information, okay? do this on a regular basis with lots of different stuff. So why would I put it past them? But that's just, again, I want to emphasize it's just my opinion, all right? So you could throw all this out. I don't really need it for my worldview. So I believe the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward. I believe David killed a Nephilim in Goliath, right? He called him the giant slayer. They weren't kidding. This guy made his living killing giants, wiped out huge numbers of them, and yeah, had to get pretty nasty to do that. By God, they wanted the temple.
Except the giants in David's time were not quite as big as the original.
Yeah, not like the original one.
Not
Which
not
is,
quite.
interestingly enough, is also the Greek story that the sons of the Titans were not as big as they were. Which I think is interesting. Anyway, so you can go do research on this
Well, the
yourself
oxygen was
if you'd
probably-
like. Right. So the climate is limiting their growth, and maybe genetics as well. So, lack of human fossils in the lower levels of fossil layers should not surprise any of us. We don't live at the bottom of the ocean. What are you going to find fossilized in the Cambrian layer? Ocean bottom stuff. You find humans down there today. We go down to the bottom of the ocean. There's Jim Bob, cooking a hot dog. And, hey, how's it? No, we don't live at the bottom of the ocean. Very difficult to do. Okay. So all these guys have been listening to Noah rant and rave about something called rain, great flood, right? They're going to head for high ground as soon as the fountains of the great deep bust open. Okay. They probably also had ships. I don't know this for sure. I just think this. Okay. The reason I think this is because the Bible says they were able to make iron and bronze. Okay. Every society that I've ever studied, something of an amateur historian, that was able to make iron and bronze could make ships. I have smelted metal before. It is difficult to smelt bronze.
Oh, bronze.
Iron requires a very high temperature to smelt. Smelting lead and aluminum, things like that is actually really easy to do. I do it all the time, casting bullets and things like that. But in ancient times, this would have been very difficult to do. They don't have propane. They don't have electricity, I assume, right? So they had to do this with charcoal, most likely. So anyway, my point is,
Coal forges are very difficult.
do what?
Coal forges
Oh,
are
my
very.
goodness.
We have a coal forge and a gas forge in our
Yeah.
house, and they're a little difficult to keep going.
It's just a lot of work. A lot of work required a advanced society to be able to do this, especially to make your own charcoal. Imagine how difficult that would be. Imagine you had to dig this stuff out of the ground too. Okay, these people had to work really hard for the metal.
They have
Anyway,
forged coal.
my point is, it'd probably be easier to build a boat than to do that. Okay, and apparently that's true because every ancient society I've ever studied was able to do this. Had pretty large ships actually, and I think that's how the Nephilim survived the flood. And you might disagree with me and say, Cartwright, the Bible clearly says that the earth was completely destroyed, and every living thing was destroyed, and all this stuff. Sure. Right, and we understand that not all the fish died. We understand there's still bacteria on the earth. We understand many of the birds survived, right? God's not saying, look, I sterilized this planet, the only thing that survived is on the ark. Noah is describing the incredible desolation that he's observing when he gets off the boat, right? Probably lived in the ark for a couple of years. Probably destroyed it and built houses out of it afterwards, okay? It was a very common thing to do in ancient times, is to reuse your lumber. In fact, it's becoming more and more common in America today. Reclaimed lumber, big business, okay?
So you're saying that Nephilim built their own ship, and that's how they survived?
I think.
200 foot tall.
Oh no.
How would the birds have survived? You said like the fish, right? They would have the water.
Marine birds.
But okay.
Yeah, like albatross and penguins. These birds spend years at sea never touching dry land. In fact, you could argue that
I was
penguins
thinking like
never
birds
ever
like
touch
flying.
Dry land.
Yeah, they don't
like,
fly the whole time
Yeah, I was
like
because they nest on an ice shelf.
yeah.
okay.
Just to
Dry.
talk about how the ratio though for Noah's Ark was perfect to survive that kind
Yeah,
of flood. So
yeah.
like all the other ships had the.
Yeah, again, I'm arguing that most of them were wiped out, right? So, I mean, the other option that you could say is that some of Noah's wife, or perhaps Noah's son's wife, had some Nephilim DNA in them. That's where the giants came from. We know
Yeah, that's
that.
what I thought, because like, I think of Noah's Ark as like the absolute only way of salvation, basically.
Yeah, and I think that's fine. I think that's perfectly within, interpretation of the scriptures. So, for example, in the Bible's account, we see that some of, I want to say it's Ham's descendants are giants. And I want to say even some of, not Japheth, Shem's.
Wasn't
There's just a
Shem
handful of
cursed?
giants, but apparently in Ham's descendants, there was a lot of them.
I wonder
Yeah.
because like Noah cursed the youngest.
Yeah, Noah cursed, I think it's
That was
Ham.
like, yeah.
Yeah.
How does a person go about cursing someone? Is it just like?
It's one of those things like, there's a reason why we don't do it.
Is it a thing that
Because
people
apparently-
can do?
I have seen Christians curse things, and I've seen those things like get destroyed. So that taught me that this is, God sometimes takes these things seriously, and you should only curse things that you really want God to destroy. But in the Bible, it happens on a regular basis, right?
Like Jacob and Esau.
Yeah, there are people like Jesus curses this tree, right? And the tree just dies. And the disciples are like, whoa. Okay, so if we curse stuff, we better be sure we want it gone. Right? So it's possible that that is part of the reason why, or it's possible that one of the wives of the, I mean, they're not even named, so maybe that's a reason why. It's because they weren't like genetically pure. I'm not really sure. I can tell you that we do find giants as descendants of some of these folks. So either they survived the flood somehow, or they're popping up as recessive genes in these people's offspring, in some cases dozens and hundreds of years after the fact. Okay. And by the way, those guys were wiped out. Okay. They were all killed off. Right. So this idea that a lot of Americans had about, oh yeah, well the Africans are a cursed race, so we're going to make them slaves. No. First of all, yeah, just no. And second of all, it is very clear from the study of the scriptures that the cursed peoples were wiped out, and that most of them lived in what is today the Middle East. And yeah, actually some of the descendants of Ham and Japheth survived and became like they were like regular people. Okay. So be careful. You study history, you find some really weird, whacked out stuff in there. Anyway, so I could argue that some of them survived the flood. Actually, that is my opinion, that some of them survived the flood. But either way, I don't have concrete evidence for it. And yeah, you could also argue that the demons came down and did that thing again, where they like had their way with humans and ended up making more demon babies. I disagree with you. First of all, the Bible doesn't say that. Okay. Second of all, in the extra biblical texts in the book of Enoch, in the book of Jubilee, Michael watches God punish the demons that did that, and he's like, look, none of us are ever going to do this again because look how harsh the punishment was, right? That's a paraphrase, but that is one of the things that happened. So I don't think there's any evidence of that. So either the giants survived the flood, or they're popping up here and there in recessive genes that are carried perhaps by Noah's sons' wives. Okay, or both. I suppose both of them is true. It's possible. All right. I think it's interesting that all the giants are cannibals
They are.
in all the stories.
Goliath's a cannibal?
If you talk about, we don't know that one, but if you look at the Native American tribes, they all have legends of giants, and there are they go something like, yeah, there used to be giants. I mean, when we got here, our ancestors came over here and they settled this land. There were giants here. We had to kill them off because they like to eat us, and that sort of puts stamps on things. You're not going to be friends with, you ate my uncle, you're out of here. We all ganged up on them and shot them with arrows, and they died because you can't miss, right? And apparently they didn't do so well in the current Earth environment. But the giants of Greek mythology, all of them were cannibals. The giants of Hawaiian mythology. Pele, the goddess Pele, she's a cannibal. She likes to eat humans.
I feel like Greek mythology is just a very morbid kind of.
It is, but that's what they encountered when they got to wherever they were. There were these giants and they liked to eat humans and we killed them all. And, you know, thank God for our great warriors who became their gods, right? Thor. Why did he become this? Oh yeah, he swung his hammer and he sort of killed all the giants and that's our hero. Well, isn't that the same with all cultures? I talk about King David, the giant slayer. He killed all the giants. Well, thank God for him, right? How about we make him our king? And well, yeah, that's where our savior is going to come from. Is the line of David, right? Pretty cool, huh? Anyway, so we don't find a lot of humans in the fossil record. We do find some of them, and we do find tales of giants. We do find human fossils and dinosaur fossils together, particularly tracks. Okay, there's another video by Dr. John Patton about the fossil formations in Glen Rose, Texas, where we clearly see human and dinosaur tracks together. There's no doubt in my mind that that is what we see. There's been a lot of debate about that. You can watch his analysis of it, and I think he makes a very convincing case for this. Just about every culture has stories of giants, cannibals. Almost all of them are cannibals. Almost all of them have genetic problems. They have red hair. They have one eye. They have two heads. Like, these people have genetic problems. Not that red hair is a genetic problem for you. It's a recessive gene, though, isn't it? Very, very rare. And in many cultures, red-haired people were like killed. Why were they so convinced that red-haired people were like demons? Maybe because they fought giants with red hair, and it was like, let's not take the chance that one of these kids grows up to be 80 foot tall and starts eating us again.
Well, what if all the people with red hair are like tall? I mean, I know because I have one friend who has red hair and she's really
No,
tall. But
I
all the
don't-
rest of the ones I know.
I don't
are
think
tall.
that's a thing.
I know
Not anymore.
Well, they
but-
used to be. They.
several short red hair.
We call them vertically challenged. My goodness. Okay, so some giants did help humans, apparently. Scripture, of course, has lots of accounts of Nephilim being on the earth after the flood. Goliath is only the most famous example of this. And God says, I want you to wipe them off the face of the earth. Kill the women, kill the kids, kill the livestock. It's a singular event, and I think there's some kind of a reason why God takes such a hardcore stance against certain tribes. Okay? He doesn't ever do that again, right? God is not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. It's a clear teaching of the scriptures. Something weird goes on with the conquest of Canaan, right? Anyway, that's just my opinion. We do find human artifacts in the fossil record. Okay, for example, a Cretaceous hammer has been found. We call it the Cretaceous hammer because it was found in the Cretaceous layer. Ever heard of the Cretaceous hammer?
No.
No.
It was found fossilized in a chunk of rock. It was not found in situ, S-I-T-U. That means it wasn't found in the layer. We found it in a rock next to the layer. The rock is made of the same stuff as
In
the
Iraq.
layer. Do what?
And I don't remember.
The Iraq.
I was trying to make a joke. It was.
What about the Iran? It's an apple
Wooden
product
running
joke.
shoes.
Anyway, so this hammer is made of a really weird alloy of iron and I believe sulfur, which usually is an impurity, right? And you want to remove that from
Apparently not.
your steel, right? So we don't make, this is not a modern manufacturer of a hammer, for sure. It has kind of a weird shape to it. They took a sample of it. I don't know if you can see in the pictures here, but there's a, right up here, there's this little silvery part. That hasn't rusted. in the years since they took the samples. So apparently this is more resistant to rust than modern hammers. I don't know if that's maybe. Again, it's a very strange alloy. To look into that. So you could argue that this is a human artifact. There are various chains and bronze statues and little pots and stuff like that that have been found in lumps of coal. But I think the most interesting human fossil is Malachite Man.
What about, did you hear about that, like, monkey meat or whatever, that it's like Molly is her name or whatever? Like,
Lucy.
Oh.
Lucy.
Yeah, Lucy. Yeah, she's definitely an ape.
They messed
It's
up
pretty.
those hips.
Yeah. Did you see in the video where the guy
I've read about it before, but I love watching it. Like how he changed
in the video?
He was like, "Oh, it's cracked. Let me like smush it to pieces and glue it all back together. Here's a mold."
He's got the little person out there.
He's using like power tools.
Yeah, that's pretty hilarious. Okay, so Malachite Man was found about, I want to say 50 or 60 feet below the surface and 150 feet from the any access to them through a road cut that was made in the 1930s. So this guy's been buried actually there's 10 skeletons that have been buried here for really deep, right? So when these were found, they were proclaimed throughout the mainstream media, and they were like, "Oh yeah, this is a Native American burial." Right, because Native Americans buried their people 50 foot below ground.
No,
Not
they did
usually.
not.
So then they tried to argue that it was a mining, right? They were mining for copper because this is a very rich deposit of copper.
Wait, is that why he's green?
Because most of the ores of copper
That's
are bluish
neat.
green.
It's pretty.
But here's the thing. Native Americans didn't do a lot of mining for copper.
Rich.
And in order to get to this layer, you have to get through these darkened layers here, which are much harder rock. In fact, when we went in there in the 1930s, we couldn't get through it with our bulldozers, and we gave up for a while.
Is that bedrock?
No, it's just a much harder sedimentary rock. This happens in a lot of sedimentary rock formations. You get a hard layer and a soft layer, and a hard layer and a soft layer. These guys were found in situ, and you can see here during the excavation this discoloration of the rock around these bones indicates that they were fossilized here. They were buried along with the rock. Okay, so they were found
So this is
buried along with the rock. These are definitely human bones. Okay, and some of them have a very high degree of mineral replacement. We're looking at basically jewelry grade turquoise here,
Really?
okay, in these teeth. Dr. Don
so
Patton
cool, though.
is one of the excavators. He has many of these bones in his possession, and down in his museum in Glen Rose, Texas. Again, there have been a total of 10 skeletons found. One of them was a child, 4 of them were female. The ladies and children do not participate in mining activities. It's not really something you'll really cut out for, no offense, but brutally hard, dark work, poor ventilation.
Even the Bible does say that. I mean, that's not, at that point, it's not sexist.
Right,
It's
yeah,
really not.
this is, if you've ever been in a mine,
Mine.
how would you like to spend 12 hours a day, 2 miles underground,
I don't think anyone wants to do that.
ankle deep in 120-degree water?
You know how hot
Yeah.
that is.
Not a place for it. So that's humans in the fossil record. Again, this is the same rock formation that we find those T-Rex skulls in. According to the evolutionists, it's supposed to be 120 million years old.
Have they ever found a malachite T-Rex or anything like that, or like?
No, this is a little bit further away than Dinosaur National Park. Copper deposits are pretty common on the Earth. We're finding this purity of them is kind of unusual.
It's almost like they were like done this before, and like it grew. Like whenever they died, they had like chemically
Well, no, they probably just got buried in a whole bunch of copper ore.
Really? I mean, without, it's weird how that would like fill your,
Well, this is what happens to all fossils, right? Mold cast fossil is minerally replaced. Crazy as that sounds. All right. We'll continue our study of the fossil record next week. I will see you then. If you didn't have a chance to view the video there that I emailed down,